Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and greetings and salam lar from the beautiful city of Baku here in Azerbaijan. I will be your moderator, Ubi Shabander, where we will discuss War and Peace, the fate of the Azerbaijan-Armenia conflict, a conflict that's been very much in the news lately, one with global implications, not just for the region, whether it's energy-wise, whether it's geopolitics, the conflict in Karabakh, the recent conclusion of the war that impacts millions of lives, not just here in the South Caucasus, but in Turkey and in Europe and the rest of the world as well. I just had the pleasure of touring the parts of Karabakh in the past few weeks. Very interesting experience. It's not very often that we all get to visit the aftermath of a recently concluded conflict. And with me are our distinguished panelists who will discuss their perspective of this recent conflict and what it means for the world. First with me, we have His Excellency Hikmet Hajiyev, the head of the Foreign Policy Department of the Presidential Administration of Azerbaijan and Assistant of the President of Azerbaijan. Welcome, Mr. Hikmet. And Laurence, the director of the Caucasus program, the Conciliation Resource, and an associate fellow at the Russian and Eurasian program at Chatham House. Welcome. And Dr. Farid Shafiyev, the chairman of the Center of Analysis of International Relations and an adjunct lecturer at the ADA University at Azerbaijan. Panelists that will give us a much needed perspective on what this conflict means for the rest of the world. We will begin our opening remarks. I kindly ask you to keep them to around 5 minutes, please, each. We will have 30 minutes for the opening remarks overall, and then 90 minutes for general discussion, for the Q&A session with our discussants. And with that, I open the floor to our first speaker, Mr. Hikmet Hajiyev.
Thank you, Obay, for this introduction. I also thank you, TRT World, organizing this timely forum and also this panel for discussing Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict. And Obay, I also didn't know that you're in Baku, and therefore, if you have a time, please come, and I will always pleasure to see you. And I'm also quite privileged and challenged to see many scholars in this panel today. And I will provide our perspective, because today is an extraordinary day in Azerbaijan, because it can be characterized as the end of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. There is no longer Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, as it was eloquently said by my president. And because in the last region out of 7 today has been liberated, and especially the Lachen region of Azerbaijan, that's strategically important. And new realities are emerging in the region of Caucasus. I would rather say new geopolitical order has emerged in the region of Caucasus. Previously, what we have seen before 27th of September, there was a status quo basis on occupation, status quo based on ethnic cleansing of Azerbaijani IDPs and refugees, status quo based on acquiring the territories by use of force, and also changing internationally recognized borders. Azerbaijan has completely destroyed such paradigm of regional security that Armenian side tried to impose on the region, and it has been shattered. And as a result of the peace enforcement operation, initially 4 regions of Azerbaijan, including some parts of the Nagorno-Karabakh region of Azerbaijan, have been liberated. As a result of this peace enforcement, Armenia was obliged and was compelled to liberate 3 regions of Azerbaijan without shooting any bullets. And in the meantime, United Nations Security Council resolutions that Azerbaijan was longing for 30 years for the implementation have been implemented. And to an extent, major part of this resolution are in place. And it's also yet another precedent that Azerbaijan set in the region for implementation of UN Security Council resolutions. We expected more than 30 years, and we demonstrated our strategic passions for implementation of these resolutions and prevalence of justice, but unfortunately it didn't happen. Therefore, since the 27th of September, Azerbaijan engaged in a peace enforcement operation. There is no longer Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, but there is still Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict, and Azerbaijan is looking forward for wider, comprehensive regional security architecture. To build such a regional security architecture, of course, with the participation of Armenia. But of course, Armenia should also make a strategic decision. Armenia now ends in a watershed between past and future. Our recommendation advice for Armenia to look into the future. Azerbaijan is ready to play its role. And in the current situation, what we'd like to see more regional ownership, regional engagement, and regional cooperation. In this regional ownership, we particularly highlight the role of Russian Federation and Brazil and Turkey. Both of them are regional countries, and their engagement, their future cooperation are also key components and columns of the wider comprehensive regional security. Russian peacekeepers are fulfilling their mission in the region, and the declaration also signed between Russia and Turkey on establishment of a joint ceasefire monitoring system that's going to be fully operational. And in the longer term perspective, we are looking forward for closer engagement of two parties, that are Russia and Turkey, for further development and consolidation of the peace and security in the region. My president also in his speech today suggested 5-party regional security and cooperation platform. It also envisaged broader mechanism, including Iran, as a neighboring country, and also participation of Armenia. And there is no longer a line of contact. We would like to change a fragmented region into the integrated region. And this integration process, based on the trilateral statement that have been signed between with the mediation of Russia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia, to open all channels of communication in the region. And we can call it New Pax Caucasus. This New Pax Caucasus is an inclusive perspective, inclusive vision from the perspective of Azerbaijan. And yet again, Armenia should also look into the future. And once again, this occupation demonstrated that Armenia has achieved nothing. 30 years of occupation simply derailed Armenia from its natural way of development. And it also undermined Armenia's own sovereignty and independence as a sovereign state. And occupation became extremely costly for Armenia. It also deprived the region from the opportunities of closer cooperation and integration. But now it's time to move forward. But now we also know that, and we also cognizant that we have key strategic challenges. It's more about an ethnic reconciliation and confidence building measures, and also wider peace building measures. Azerbaijan is ready to play its role. And it's also our appeal to the Armenians who are living in Nagorno-Karabakh. We do perceive them as citizens of Azerbaijan. And they will see the difference living under the sovereignty of Azerbaijan with dignity, honor, and security, and with a better economic situation. And Armenia can also benefit from this prospects of the economic cooperation, wider regional integration, especially with the opening borders and communications. Based on the paradigm of the New Pax Caucasus, in our discussion period, we can elaborate a little more. At this stage, I stop here, and I hope that I respect the time limits. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hajiyev. Really appreciate that. And Pax Caucasus, very interesting statement. We'll have to ask you more about that later in the discussion period. And next, our next speaker, Dr. Laurence Browers, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for organizing this event and for inviting me to speak. I'll address briefly the question of whether the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict has in fact ended, or whether it's set to continue, albeit in different form. The 10th of November agreement was decisive in ending the war, but in other respects, it prevented a decisive strategic outcome. Azerbaijan has won a military victory, and Armenia has lost in a crushing defeat, yet neither was total. Politically, the project to restore Azerbaijani territorial integrity remains incomplete, and the countervailing project to establish a separate political identity in Nagorno-Karabakh survives, albeit in much truncated form. Both Armenia and Azerbaijan have been left with enough of a cause to continue their rivalry if they choose to do so. At the geopolitical level, Russia has succeeded in ending the bloodshed and appears to win with the deployment of peacekeepers to Azerbaijan. But Turkey's new role also forces recognition of the fact that Russia does not hold and has not held for some time the kind of patronage monopoly that characterizes real hegemony. At both levels, national and regional, the 10th of November agreement thus delivers tactical rather than truly decisive outcomes. And this may lead over time to strategic dissatisfaction and new instability. Although these outcomes have come about in a very top-down way, what Armenia and Azerbaijan now do is crucial. The challenges for both are considerable. Armenia has lost very substantial human and material resources. Its basic strategic doctrine, responsibility for the security of Karabakh Armenians, and much of the basis for a national identity focused on Nagorno-Karabakh in the post-Soviet era. There is a very significant conversation that needs to take place now in Armenia about the experience of the last 26 years and what is next for the country. For Azerbaijan, there is understandably a sense of justice having been served and vindication of its military and diplomatic strategies. Yet this new situation also brings many challenges. Russian peacekeeping operations have become a source of discord in other Eurasian parent states, and containing that risk will be a significant challenge for both Azerbaijani and Russian diplomacy. Rehabilitating the deoccupied territories and rebuilding viable communities within them is a formidable task, and ensuring that communities participate in processes of reconstruction will contribute to their ultimate viability and success. But perhaps the key challenge is the future of the Armenian-Azerbaijani relationship itself. No one underestimates the depth and scale of renewed polarization and hostility emanating from the experience of the last 6 weeks. Yet for vibrant and secure communities of Azerbaijani returnees in Nagorno-Karabakh and the deoccupied territories, and for transit corridors to become real vehicles for regional development beyond safe passage through enemy territory, a transformation in Armenian-Azerbaijani relations is necessary. And there is now an opportunity to craft an integrative peace, weaving the defeated party into a new regional structure, meeting sufficient needs to remove the basis for that structure to be contested in the future. The alternative is a punitive peace involving the kind of long-term humiliation that Azerbaijan itself had to endure for more than a quarter century. Azerbaijan now has an opportunity to refashion and retool its relationships, not with a monolithic mythologized enemy, but with a variety of real-world Armenian communities, most importantly, the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh and the Republic of Armenia. With regard to the former, the question of status is not mentioned in the 10th of November agreement, but this doesn't change the fact that this remains the paramount issue that is contested between Armenians and Azerbaijanis, and normalization of relations will ultimately depend on some resolution of this issue. On both sides, the question of normalization is so easily blocked by examples of the other side's cynicism or bad faith. But normalizing relations is the only route to desecuritizing and deinternationalizing this conflict and ending a situation where foreign troops are needed to keep a fragile peace. The fate of the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict therefore depends on whether a new situation evolves that ultimately weaves Armenia and Azerbaijan into a common structure defined more by interests than positions and establishing the possibility of partnership rather than rivalry. On the other hand, a repetition of the last 25 years, when development worked around and embedded conflict, makes it more likely that we'll see the emergence of a heavily securitized and segregated periphery populated by sparse, economically dependent, and mutually hostile communities. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Laurence. Fascinating. And we will definitely have many questions for you. I now will open the floor to Dr. Farid and following him to Mr. Sergei Markedonov. Dr. Farid, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. And I would like also to acknowledge many distinguished colleagues and the familiar faces. Thank you very much for organizing and bringing all these people together. I'll try to be brief, 5-8 minutes, to continue kind of the discussion about the vision of the future peace. But before going very briefly about some history of the conflict, because I think some obstacles related to the past, to the history, still persist, and we have really to make a critical review of what happened since the beginning of the modern conflict in order not to repeat that. As we know that the modern conflict began in February 1988, with the Armenian nationalist demonstration in Nagorno-Karabakh region of Azerbaijan with the slogan of Miatsum, which in Armenian language means unification. And that was the project rooted in the a bit mythologized concept of the Great Armenia, of creating the big the state. And interestingly enough, during the Soviet Union, the many Western policymakers and experts supported Armenian nationalists, seeing this an opportunity to dismantle the Soviet Union and to redraw the borders of the former Soviet Union. And interestingly enough, the communist authorities naturally was against that. But once the Soviet Union collapsed, it became vice versa. The Moscow see an opportunity to, the Armenia was traditional historical ally in the region, with taking into account always the linkages with the Armenian groups in the South Caucasus, the resettlement policy, and etc. So the Moscow decided to support Armenia and in the war of 1992-93, and further on, the Russia was supporting Armenia. I'm speaking about the military support, the delivery of the military equipment, the weapons, the events in 1907, and so on. And the Armenia hosted a Russian military base, and eventually they became the part of the single the military alliance, the collective security treaty. While Russia was trying to maintain this uncertainty around the conflict resolution, the West approach was a bit different, taking into account the strong Armenian lobby in countries like France and United States. They tend to support some of the Armenian territorial claims, especially some of the experts, Western experts and policymakers. They tended and tried to convince Azerbaijani side that they should give up Nagorno-Karabakh for the return of the 7 regions. The American scholar Thomas Ambrosio termed this situation as international permissive environment, which allowed Armenia to occupy, and not only occupy, but for this 27 years since the adoption of United Nations Security Council resolutions, to keep this territory under control. So I think this is important to acknowledge in terms of the geopolitical interests of the major regional and global players. Finally, we have the Second Karabakh War, which restored Azerbaijan's territorial integrity. But I agree that the conflict is not fully politically resolved. It's the military resolved. It's no longer Nagorno-Karabakh exists as a notion. And actually, it's the artificial notion, because historically there was only Karabakh, and Nagorno-Karabakh was artificially created by the Soviet authorities in 1921-23. The Second Karabakh War should be a reminder to the whole international community, especially to United States, Europe, and Russia, the principal mediators of the original of the conflict, that a ceasefire, no matter how long in length, remains only a temporary solution. Furthermore, ignoring international law does not bring stability in any given region, despite whatever short-term benefits that the global and regional powers might gain from freezing a conflict or leaving it unresolved. This is equally applicable both to the past 27 years since the adoption of the UN Security Council resolutions on Nagorno-Karabakh, and it will be applicable to the 5-year term, which we have now while the Russian peacekeepers stay in Armenian populated areas of Karabakh. What is important, the previous speaker spoke about the future peace, and with some troubling news we have still from Armenia. The voicing the same familiar and unhelpful rhetoric about the Karabakh, and unfortunately it has supporters in capitals like in Paris, and I'm referring to the infamous Senate decision recently, the French Senate. Armenia needs new approaches to its future, which requires improving relations with its neighbors, first of all, Turkey and Azerbaijan. If official Yerevan continues with insisting on independence of any part of Azerbaijan and will promote further xenophobic narratives, the country will be further trapped in isolation without an independent foreign economic policy. Gerard Liberidian, an ex-advisor to former Armenian President Levon Ter-Petrosyan, considers it essential to abandon this policy, which has been pursued for the past 22 years. Svante Carnell, research director of the Central Asia Caucasus Institute, believes that the future of Armenia does not depend on the fact whether the current prime minister stays or goes. Rather, it remains to be seen whether Armenia will learn from this misadventure and embark upon a serious attempt to negotiate a peace. Russian expert Maxim Artemyev stresses the ceasefire agreement opened the way for Armenia to revival, the opportunity to become a normal country without historical complexes, phobias, and myths. Western policymakers appear more concerned for time being with geopolitics, Turkey, Russia, rather than with the fate of people of the South Caucasus. So all this a bit troubling news, and I believe the international community, the Western expert community, Russian policymakers, and they need to convince Armenia to abandon the old narrative and embark on the new policy of cooperation. There is some good news. I'm referring to the remarks made by the Minister of Economy, new Minister of Economy of Armenia, who said about the possibility of opening the markets, Armenian, Azerbaijani markets. And today, President of Azerbaijan, in his address to the nation, he stressed that the corridor, which will the 10th November, the agreement envisages, the corridor between Nakhchivan and Azerbaijan, will open opportunities, economic opportunities for all countries of the region. I will stop on this with some hope about the positive future development. But again, to reach durable peace, we need the major revision of approaches, and it's when people and the experts stresses the importance of the Armenians in Karabakh. I just would like to stress that it's not the problem only with Armenians in Karabakh, but it's the lack of some of the Armenian policymakers to live with Azerbaijanis, either in Azerbaijan or even in Armenia, because we should not forget the fact that 250,000 Azerbaijanis live in Armenia. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Farid. Thank you very much, as always, for your insightful analysis. And last but certainly not least, for the Russian perspective, Mr. Sergei Markedonov, the editor-in-chief of the Journal of International Analytics, coming to us from Russia. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me express my sincere gratitude for the organizers to have me here as a contributor. I understand their real lack of the time, and this is why I will try to be brief, focusing on some basic elements and consequences of the recent escalation of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. First of all, let me focus on the general developments in the South Caucasus as a result of this escalation. Then I will concentrate on the explanation of the Russian behavior in it and Russian foreign policy, and I'm going to touch also the Russian-Turkish relationship, because it's widely discussed and a lot of questions, stereotypes were raised around this problem. Now, I suppose we see the establishment of the third status quo in the South Caucasus after the dissolution of the USSR. The first one was connected with the first generation of ethno-political conflicts. They go back to the time of the last years of the USSR, and they were connected with the two lines of confrontation: Union Republic versus Union Center, and Union Republic versus autonomous entities. As a result, we saw emergence of some ethnopolitical conflicts in Nagorno-Karabakh, Abkhazia, South Ossetia as a result of the collapse of the USSR. They were frozen in the early 90s, but not resolved. The second status quo change we could see in 2008 August, when Russia intervened 5 days war in South Ossetia, recognizing the independence of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. It was the case when the two autonomous entities obtained just limited but independence. It was a demonstration of resource and potential of secessionism in the post-Soviet space in general, in the South Caucasus in particular. Now we see the other vector of the development. Azerbaijan managed to restore its control over lost territories. This is why in the post-Soviet space it became the second country after Russia who lost territories as a result of the first generation of the conflicts in the 90s, and then successfully managed to regain control. I mean, here the Russian case in Chechnya, and now Azerbaijan. I understand fully that there are no direct parallels, but nevertheless, some models can be compared with no absolute parallels, of course. And now Azerbaijan successfully regained control over lost territories, and we see the demonstration of principles of territorial integrity in the South Caucasus, which will have impact not only on the region. The Russian position. Since the first minutes of the Second Karabakh War, I heard a lot of voices who raised the question on the presence of Russia. Even I joke that in 2014, many people admired immediate reaction of Russia in Crimea or Donbass, but now they were disappointed or frustrated the absence of reaction of Russia. It was not, of course, absence of reaction. I suppose the case of Nagorno-Karabakh brilliantly demonstrates the absence of universal approach of Russia to all ethnopolitical conflicts in the post-Soviet space. Russia has no universal recipe and has a variety of different approaches dependent on three basic principles and developments. First of all, situation inside Russia itself, then bilateral dynamics between Russia and the post-Soviet countries like Georgia, Azerbaijan, Ukraine, Moldova, and some others, and wider context. I mean here relationship between Russia and the West,
Yes.
NATO, European Union, United States. This is why we can see that if Azerbaijan was not pro-NATO country, it was rather pragmatic in relationship with EU, Russia could not provide the same policy to Azerbaijan like to Georgia or to Ukraine. A lot of differences existed, and this is why Russia preferred to balance between Armenia and Azerbaijan, promoting the idea of ceasefire, not one-sided support to maternal state or secessionist area. And now let me conclude, because I face, as well as my predecessors, the lack of the time. It's necessary to be disciplined. The factor of Turkey and Russian-Turkish relations. I can quote my Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, who said that, of course, we are not strategically allied with Turkey, but at the same time, we have a lot of overlapping interests, and we communicate in a lot of areas, be it Syria, Libya, and South Caucasus also. This is why, let me quote one of my good colleagues and friends from Turkey, Bülent Aras, who characterized the Russian-Turkish relations and competitive cooperation. Yeah, we have some areas of not full agreement, by the way, but at the same, and doubts maybe, but at the same time, we value our cooperation and we understand necessity to strengthen and to develop, to promote the exclusive Eurasian security model with no domination of external actors, be it United States, European Union. This is why we are interested to find some points of mutual understanding with Turkey, understanding a lot of potential problems and collisions. One phrase about ceasefire agreement, maybe not agreement, it was joint statement of Ministers Putin, Pashinyan, and Aliyev. It was not comprehensive political agreement. of course. It's a chance. You can obtain a full comprehensive resolution of the problem, or maybe not. It's not 100% guarantee, but it's a chance. And I am happy that my country, Russia, contributed seriously to obtain this chance. Thank you so much again, and I'm open for your interventions, comments, and questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergei. We really appreciate your perspective coming from Russia. Of course, the Russian Federation and its role playing a major factor in the immediate aftermath of this conflict, and this is certainly a topic that many of our discussants will want to dive into, in addition to the Turkish role. I would like to thank our panelists, and we can now jump right into the discussion phase. And so we can jump right into it. So if any of our discussants have a question, please let me know, and we can begin the discussion phase.
Hi, thanks. Thanks to the panelists for giving very informative remarks. It's great to see such familiar faces. For the Azerbaijani participants, I want to congratulate you on a very significant and important day today, just December 1st, taking back the final district, Lachen. So you and your fellow countrymen should be very proud of the sacrifices made by your armed forces during the recent conflict. I have three sort of points with kind of questions weaved in, if I may. The first one is we heard a lot about the economic plan for the region, and there is no doubt that this frozen conflict, the fighting over Nagorno-Karabakh, has denied the region billions of dollars in foreign direct investment over the years. And now here's an opportunity for this to change. And we keep hearing about regional infrastructure, regional integration that can include Armenia. No one's mentioned Georgia. This would also benefit Georgia as well. But have there been any concrete proposals? Has there been any grand gestures made by Baku towards perhaps Armenia? Or has there been any overtures made by Turkey to Armenia about better economic integration? I appreciate right now the mood in Yerevan and the mood in Baku probably isn't conducive to this sort of discussion publicly, but at least privately, has there been any discussion about this? The second, the second question is, I'm interested to know more about how Azerbaijan can show and exert sovereignty in some of these regions, especially the areas where there are going to be Russian peacekeepers. For example, will there be official buildings in Carnegie that will fly the Azerbaijani flag? On the Lachen corridor motorway, of course, Russia is providing the security for this 5-kilometer zone along the motorway. But will Azerbaijan provide the law enforcement and the traffic control, for example? It would be very interesting to learn more about how Azerbaijan will show sovereignty in these regions. And then finally, and I know that the ink is not even dry on the three-party agreement between Russia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia regarding the Russian peacekeepers. But as we get closer to the 5-year decision point about renewing this peacekeeping, this is more of a comment and not a question. I think we should start thinking now about how we can create the conditions to transition this Russian peacekeeping force to a civilian monitoring mission that is more in line with perhaps what is seen with the European Union monitoring mission in Georgia. I'm not saying the EU should do it. All I'm saying is that it would be in everyone's benefit in the region if this Russian peacekeeping mission transitioned into a civilian monitoring mission with international observers. So those are kind of my 3 points. Again, I want to thank everyone for your very interesting comments, and I look forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Appreciate that question. Should we have Mr. Hikmet? That's a very important question regarding the potential possibility of economic integration between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I'd love to get your perspective on that. Would that be a possibility now that the Karabakh War is over?
Thank you, Bay, and thank you also, Luke, for your comments. Yeah. Yes. Should I answer or continue with the questions?
No, please, Mr. Hikmet, go.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. As regards to economic plans, first things first. Of course, the region needs a new Marshall Plan. When I'm talking about a Marshall Plan, of course, Azerbaijan first of all looks at its own opportunities and own economic potential, and we need our own national Marshall Plan for rebuilding with the occupied territories, because everything has been destroyed in these territories. I myself was really disappointed and frustrated to see the cities of Fizuli and Aghdam, because before the occupation, I have been to these areas, almost everything has been destroyed. It's a scorched earth policy. It can be also called urbicide, like a genocide against the cities. Therefore, it will require a lot of resources from Azerbaijan to build and reconstruct these areas. And as a matter of the key urgency, we will also need comprehensive demining programs and also neutralize with unexploded ordnance, that's a remnants of war. As regards an economic integration with Armenia, key fundamental fact here is that it's also enshrined in the Trilateral declaration that signed between 3 parties. It's about an opening of communication. Armenia is also a landlocked country. Armenia can also be land-linked country. And also Armenia could also be wider regional transportation system. In a sense that via Nakhchivan and via the Mehri corridor, we can also link Armenia and Azerbaijan. And Armenia can also be part of the wider East-West corridor or ancient Silk Road project that's also running from the region. It can add additional benefit. As regards further integration of Armenia to the economic benefits, but here, first things first, Armenia should also be ready to respecting its neighbors. Finally, there should be new realities based on the new peace environment between Armenia and Azerbaijan. As I already said, Nagorno-Karabakh conflict to an extent is not over, but Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict is not over. Armenia should finally say that it's not respecting the borders of its neighbors and also respecting the territorial integrity of its neighbors. And of course, it comes to Azerbaijan. Based on that reality, we can build a new relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And based on this vision, we can move forward. And the same applies to the Turkish-Armenian relations. And Armenia should also put an end to the territorial claims towards Turkey. And good news is that we are hearing some positive news from Armenia. But unfortunately, we are also hearing some revanchist ideologies from Armenia. It's not in no way our intention to see yet again a revanchist Armenia seeking revenge or repetition of the war kind scenarios. It will be yet another disaster for the region. Of course, it will be yet another disaster for Armenia itself. Therefore, what I said that Armenia is in the watershed between future and the past. Our recommendation, our advice for Armenia is to look in the future. As our parents, we cannot also choose or change our neighbors. We are diverse, and it's our destiny. Now we have a new paradigm of the security environment. Based on that, thinking about the future generation, we can build integrated and comprehensive peace, but based on respect, based on respecting our territorial integrities and putting aside and putting in our past what happened before. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hikmet, for that, for your answer. Luke, your second question was on how Azerbaijan will assert sovereignty over the areas where there are Russian peacekeepers and observers. Was that correct?
Yeah, for the most part. In a nutshell, that was the question. I'm just curious if there's any more information that can be shared publicly. I appreciate that this is all new. This is all new stuff. We're in uncharted territory in many ways. Some of these final details are being worked out. But I was wondering if there was any more information on this.
Obay, if you don't mind, I would just quickly react on that issue because I know that it's in a widely discussed. As regards sovereignty issues, of course, we should also understand that there are certain, we are at the early stage of all of these developments. But most important thing about what has been written in the declaration have been implemented. It once again shows a seriousness of intention. It also shows that the parties are committed to this process. And in this case, I would like particularly to highlight the role of Russian Federation, because what's written over there have been implemented, and Russia also put its in a political weight behind that. In the meantime, we see very active and constructive engagement from the side of Brazil and Turkey. And we also see that joint monitoring system of the ceasefire regime has been established between Turkey and Russia. It will be in the sovereign territory of Azerbaijan. And we are alone based on the regional ownership. And I would like to highlight this principle about regional ownership, because Turkey and Russia are neighboring countries to South Caucasus. And to an extent, these countries have legitimate security concerns. And we do also strongly believe that it's in the best interest of the two countries to see sustainable and long-lasting peace in the region. Therefore, based on this paradigm, we are moving forward. And we are also putting together legal frameworks of the presence of the peacekeepers. One important element I would like to highlight here, that we have launched a process of transit of Russian cargoes, humanitarian and military cargoes, from the territory of Azerbaijan to Khankendi. Would you appreciate that Russia also sees Azerbaijan to reaching out Khankendi via Azerbaijan based on the parameters, based on the legal framework that has been put in place, especially based on the protocol that has been signed between Russia and Azerbaijan. And for Russian peacekeeper at the current stage, reaching to Khankendi or via Azerbaijan sovereign territory, it's also an example for other international partners. If they would like to have any kind of process or engagement through the uncontrolled territories of Azerbaijan, they should run their activities through Baku. We are in the process, we are consolidating fragile peace, we are putting together all elements together. It will require some time. There are still some challenges, but the most important thing that we have in a ceasefire, commitments are on the table, and commitments have been implemented, and based on that vision, we are moving forward.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hikmet. We're going to move on now to the next question. Mr. Asaf Hajiyev, the floor is yours. I believe you have a question to our panelists.
No, I have no question. I'd like to make some comments, if possible, about economical cooperation. But first of all, I would like to express my thanks to the leadership of TRT for World Forum for organizing this panel, and thank you for inviting me here. About economical cooperation, there is only one necessary condition. When we are saying about economical cooperation, we have to consider all regions. I mean, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, Iran, Russia. And there is only one necessary condition. Armenia should withdraw their territorial pretension to Azerbaijan, to Georgia, to Iran, to Turkey. Because without implementation of these conditions, it is not possible to have wide cooperation. It is a necessary condition. This is I wanted just to add. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Asaf Hajiyev. We will move on now to the next question. I believe, Mrs. Nigar, you have a question to our panelists. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank our amazing speakers for their comments and thoughts. I just have a couple of additions to make to what my colleagues basically said. So we have now two dimensions to the conflict resolution. First one is the implementation of trilateral agreement, trilateral declaration, let's say, which goes as planned. And today Lachin is back, which is a big thing for us. There were certain of obstacles from Armenian side, like destruction of Azerbaijani lands, forgery of our monuments, destruction of museum, etc. But Azerbaijan have always been doing in full compliance with international law. But now what I'm trying to say is that there are two sides to the agreement. First one is the clauses that had clear deadlines and schedules of implementation. And apart from the immediate steps which are scheduled, there are also clauses that do not have firm deadline on them in the declaration. For example, two of them are transport corridor via Armenia to Nakhchivan, important issue, and the second one is the return of Azerbaijani refugees to their lands. Both of these points and both of these actions require political will from Armenian side. But there is a second dimension: is what is the root of the conflict actually? The root of the conflict lie in the ideology which is dominant in Armenia for the last 3 decades. This is the ideology of ethnic supremacy, of territorial claims towards its neighbors. And two results of this ideology are: first one is Armenia, which turned into a mono-ethnic state during the 20th century with 99% Armenian population, which is a very shameful achievement, by the way. And the second one is the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, which brought 30 years long occupation of Azerbaijani lands and lots of grievances to Azerbaijani population. And by the way, which brought nothing good to Armenia itself. So the route to sustainable, long-lasting peace is through Armenia dropping and forgetting its ideology. And there are unfortunately very little signs to this. My colleague, Mr. Brewers, mentioned that during this last 6 weeks, the hostilities and maybe polarization got worse. But I don't think so. Actually, 3 of the leaders of Armenia, Robert Kocharian, Serge Sarkisyan, and Nikol Pashinyan, 3 of them, I quote, Kocharian saying that Armenians and Azerbaijanis are genetically incompatible. Sarkisyan saying that before Khojaly, Azerbaijanis were thinking that we've been joking with them. We prove them being wrong. And Pashinyan saying that now we are cutting their paws off. So what I mean is that this is the ideology in Armenia. And never we've seen anyone in the Armenian political system who said that whether it is correct to keep Azerbaijani lands under occupation. So for bringing back economic relations, for bringing back peace and long-lasting peace to the region, Armenia should drop off these claims, should drop off territorial claims to Azerbaijan, should start normal, proper relations between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and between Armenia and Turkey. This is the only way for Armenia to succeed and for peace to come to the region. Again, and in this situation, Armenia is the most one who loses in this situation. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Nagar. Actually, that's a very important point, and I'd like to actually get our panel's perspective on that. Is it in the realm of possibility that Armenia will change its strategic ideology? Please.
May I have floor?
Yes, Mr. Azerbaijan.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to comment also what this war showed to the world. The war showed that, but Azerbaijan today is a strong country in economical meaning. At the same time, Azerbaijan has very modern army, but Azerbaijan never pretends to the territory of the neighbors. I will look to Armenia, small country, 2.5 million population. They pretend to Azerbaijani territory, to Georgian territory, to Turkish territory, to Iranian territory. But they have to stop it. Today, the world in the crossroads. There are 2 ways. The first way, again, support double standards, to say one thing and to do another, right? It is support pretension of some country to territory another country. When we'll get again war. We'll have a war between Armenia, Georgia, Iran, Turkey, because they still pretend to the territory. But another way to support resolution of Security Council of United Nations, of European Parliament, Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe, PAPSEC, and so on. And as a matter of this process, the world will get stable partners like Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is very stable partner, implement all obligations, and at the same time, Azerbaijan implemented huge projects which has world meaning, not regional meaning. I mean, Bakud Velisi Kars, Bakud Velisi Ceyhan, Bakud Velisi Kars, TAP, TANAK, which have been finished recently. And so the world have to think how continue their activities, because support Azerbaijan, it will bring peace to the region and cooperation. I would like
Thank you,
also
Mr.
mention about corridor. Just a moment, I will finish my just 1 minute, please. Corridor, but have a look. The goods from Turkey will be delivered to Central Asia. Central Asia is the region with 80 million people. And you can imagine which high impulse can come to the region. So today we have peace. It is very sensitive peace, but the world and all partners should do their best to save it and to have stable peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Asif Hajiyev. Some very good points. I would like to bring that very important question that Mrs. Nigar raised to our panelists. Do you believe, and any one of you can please jump in and answer this, that the resolution of this conflict will shift Armenia's strategic calculus and ideology, or do you think it will perhaps further harden it? Please, anyone from the panel, jump in.
I can perhaps try to perhaps to very briefly answer that. I agree with Nigar Hanum that there has been a very regrettable strain of ethnicist ideology. The suggestion that Armenians and Azerbaijanis are fundamentally incompatible, of course, is not true. It's disproved by history. Now, since independence, there have, in a sense, been different visions of Armenia. In my book, Anatomy of a Rivalry, I wrote about this, that there is a compliant Armenia that seeks to become a fully fledged member of the international community, kind of more along the lines of legality, complying with a broader sense of territorial integrity, negotiating on Nagorno-Karabakh, and so on. And that was overtaken by a different vision, which I think Farid referred to in his presentation, which I call augmented Armenia, which is an enlarged territorial space homeland. And so the question now is whether Armenia can revive the idea of compliant Armenia in ways that Armenians themselves can buy into and validate and find legitimate. And in a sense, that also produces a question for Azerbaijan. What can Azerbaijan do to promote and to foreground a compliant vision of Armenia over an augmented one? Augmented Armenia depends on this sense of absolute ethnic incompatibility. And so we need a whole array, as I mentioned, a retooling of Azerbaijan's policy interfaces with Armenian communities to build confidence, to build trust. Well, we in European civil society hope to be able to contribute to that process.
Yes, Mr. Farid, would you like to jump in on that, please?
I would like to comment. Yeah, definitely everything already was emphasized about the importance of territorial integrity. I think this is a prerequisite for normal relationship in the South Caucasus. But what Mr. Breuer's telling, it's about what Azerbaijan should do. Definitely there is long way for reconciliation, but I wonder the situation now in the Western expert community, among Western policymakers, and I still see the same troubling the positions, arguments voiced before. Giving the kind of the encouragement to all this conversation about the first Christian nation and about again, I'm referring decision of the French Senate. Instead of doing something for reconciliation, I think that the France is just jealous of Russian-Turkish, the arrangement in the South Caucasus. Whatever the interest of both countries, I think it might work in a best way. to create the atmosphere of cooperation in the South Caucasus. So this is the worrisome, that because I believe without the support and encouragement from the diaspora and from the policymakers, whether it will be in I'm speaking about policymakers, the major, the center of powers. That's the European Union, United States, and Russia. Russia looks like, for time being, it's actually would like to have the solution, at least the implementation of November 10th decision. But from the United States and from the European policymakers, we don't see a really constructive approach. They always lobby efforts was the call. I'm speaking about what the Congress, the motions, possible motions after Biden coming to power. So this is I think should be resolved there, because without their support, the Armenian nationalists won't be able to promote this agenda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Farid. Very, very important point. Mr. Stanislav, I believe you have a question. Please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, first of all, for this opportunity to be the part of this panel with distinguished colleagues from all around the world. And first of all, I would like to congratulate our Azeri colleagues with this significant day to returning of Lachin region, which more than 25 years was far from the native country. Yes, we now in the new status quo after the 10th of November, and this new status quo, on the one hand, happily finished the Second Karabakh War, but also put a set of questions about the future of the regions. And today's speech of President Aliyev shows that Azerbaijan and its leader have a vision of long-term development of the region, first of all, from the development of economic ties, repairing cooperation within the region. And this is a very positive signal for all sides of this conflict. But unfortunately, we have several challenges for this agreement from the November. First of all, this is the uncertainty with the delimitation process between Armenia and Azerbaijan on the state borders, because each sides unfortunately have their own vision, and sometimes it's the source of conflicts. The second, of course, this is the future of the status of Nagorno-Karabakh, because this topic was out of the agreement. In this regard, of course, I would like to ask Dr. Hajiyev about how Azerbaijan sees future of forward negotiations about the Nagorno-Karabakh. Should it be the international forum with participation of external players, or which format is preferable for Azerbaijan, and how Azerbaijan see in future to this negotiation track? Thank you so much.
Question to me,
Mr.
or
Hikmet,
to
please, a
Mr.
very
Hikmet
important question.
Hajiyev?
Dr. Hajiyev.
Yeah,
I believe to
Who
Mr.
are
Hikmet
both,
Hajiyev.
Hajiyev?
thank you.
Yeah.
Both Hajiyevs can respond to that. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stanislav, for your congratulations and also for your comments in general. And first thing you mentioned, delineation and demarcation between Armenia and Azerbaijan as in two sovereign countries. And during the Soviet time, there wasn't a delineation between the Soviet republics, and it was also a case between Soviet Azerbaijan and Soviet Armenia. And unfortunately, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, Armenia didn't respect it, and there was a direct military occupation and aggression from the side of Armenia. But now, in the liberation of Azerbaijan's territories, and especially Kalbajar region and Lachin region, and also Russian peacekeepers are also applying the modus operandi existed during the Soviet time in applying demarcation and delineation lines that existed during the Soviet time. But we have seen in the process that Armenian side tried to derail from that format. But of course, we saw well-established facts on the ground, including the maps are existing since the Soviet time. And based on that reality, we are moving forward. But of course, with the prospect of the final peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan based on the respect on the territorial integrity of two sides. There should be new, very precise delineation and demarcation of the borders between two countries. But Azerbaijan from its side is ready for such a development, but ball in the court of Armenian side, that Armenia should very in a clear manner reaffirm its commitment and for the respect to Azerbaijan's territorial integrity, as we are respecting territorial integrity of all our neighbors. As regards the format of the Minsk group or negotiation format in general, of course, Azerbaijan, remains committed to the Minsk group format. But in the meantime, we should also highlight the fact that Minsk group process proved itself ineffective. Azerbaijan rendered a lot of expectation. It was not only Azerbaijan, international community rendered a lot of confidence and expectation on the Minsk group format, but it didn't yield any particular results on that process. Without denying the role of the Minsk process, I would like to highlight once again regional ownership, regional engagement, because regional countries, especially Turkey and Russia, and their closer engagement and cooperation and coordination are key fundamental factors of building new regional security architecture or Pax Caucasus. In a sense, it will provide a durable peace and sustainable peace in the region. So let's also be realistic. Regional peace in the region of the South Caucasus is not just a matter of the election for Russia and Turkey, because it's a matter of a legitimate security concept. But unfortunately, we have seen that some European politicians, it's also about a matter of election process. For us, it's a matter of the life and death. It's also a matter of the people on the ground. As regards the Minsk group process in general, we do think that there are key fundamental issues. The cart can't be put before the horse. Unfortunately, we have seen some unilateral actions from some Minsk group members that try to put the cart before the horse and raising up status issue at least in a fragile period of time. It was completely counterproductive. It was not in the sense of providing impartiality in the full line of the mediation process. Therefore, first, in the Minsk group process, and all member countries of the Minsk group should be very active and should be in the process. There shouldn't be any segregation and discrimination. From here, we should also highlight the fact that Turkey is also a Minsk group process member, and Turkey should also take an active part along some other European countries. In the meantime, Minsk group can find its niche capability to contribute to peace process instead of there shouldn't be monopoly of some European countries that are trying to impose their own one-sided approach to the process. And that context, I would see that ethnic reconciliation, that could be niche area that Minsk group in a wider context can contribute. In the meantime, confidence building measures, because we have seen a lot of confidence building sort of initiatives and measures that try to be put on the table, but none have been quite effective. But now it's in a time really to build real confidence building mechanisms and ethnic reconciliation in the region. From that perspective, I will think that Minsk group process could be effective. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hikmet. Very, very interesting. The possibility of ethnic reconciliation and between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and potentially the role of Europe. Mr. Emre Ersin, you have a question, sir. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I would also like to take this opportunity to thank TRT World for organizing this very timely meeting. And I would also like to thank the speakers for their excellent presentations. Although they were short, I really learned a lot. And my question would be for Mr. Hajiyev again, because he's the one who mentioned Pax Caucasus and the interesting proposal that came from the Turkish leaders back in 2008, which was the Caucasus Stability and Cooperation Platform. And I would also agree that we need some kind of a regional security mechanism in the Caucasus, because this is probably the weakest point in the former Soviet space. I mean, in the Caucasus, we lack a very effective regional security mechanism. And back in the day, the proposal that was made by Turkey definitely had its merits. But is it really possible or viable, let's say, to focus on the Caucasus Stability and Cooperation Platform now? And because as far as I remember, for example, the Western countries were actually excluded from this platform. I mean, it was supposed to be only including Turkey, Russia, and the three Trans-Caucasus countries. Is it really possible for us to come up or to refresh that proposal in 2020? Or what should be the pillars of this new Pax Caucasia that you mentioned? Realistically, should we expect some kind of a Pax Caucasia to emerge under the within the framework of Caucasus Stability and Cooperation Platform? And I also have a second question for Mr. Markedonov. He mentioned Turkish-Russian relations, and I remember one of my colleagues actually refers to the relationship between the two countries as a managed regional rivalry. Would you agree with that comment? Do we really believe that this is actually a rivalry rather than a cooperation on the regional level? So thank you very much.
Thank you, Emre.
Thank you.
Two very
Mr.
important
Obey, with your
questions.
permission.
Mr. Hikmet, a question on, absolutely, please go ahead. And I would love to get right after you, Mr. Hikmet, Mr. Sergei's reaction to Pax Caucasia as well. Mr. Hikmet, the floor is yours.
Emre Bey, thank you for your question. And as regards in Pax Caucasia, and you mentioned also Stability Pacts. And everybody here knows that there was a different initiatives of the Stability Pacts for the Caucasus. Even there were indications of applying Balkan sort of a Stability Pact to the Caucasus. But none of them have worked because we had an injustice on the ground, and we have a fact of occupation or status quo based on occupation on the ground. Therefore, it couldn't be in no way effective. But unfortunately, what we have seen that on a unilateral basis, Armenian side for many years tried to impose such kind of security pact in the region, and they were to an extent proponent of such an approach. In no way it was unacceptable for Azerbaijan, because generally for Azerbaijan never reconciled with the fact of occupation. But now we have a new paradigm and new realities on the region. Status quo occupation has been destroyed. Line of contact has been destroyed. Now we have a real fact of the occupation on the ground, but Azerbaijan's territories have been liberated. And based on that new paradigm, in no way it's not my intention to compare it with the post-Second World War Europe or World War II Europe, but to an extent we can draw some similarities because facts of occupation have been taken from the table, and based on the reality, Europe also moved forward, also based on the interest of the economic integration, firstly, and then some other integration mechanisms. However, based on this new paradigm, Azerbaijan is looking forward. We are not starting from the scratch or from the point of zero. So far, during the 30 years of Azerbaijan independence, we have managed to build elements of such a security and economic architecture in the region. First applies to Azerbaijan's relations on a bilateral basis with Turkey, brotherly Turkey and Azerbaijan, but in a special relations. In the meantime, strategic partnership and good neighborly relations between Russia and Azerbaijan, and from another side, Iran and Azerbaijan, good neighborly and closer relations with Iran and Azerbaijan. And then we try to apply it in a trilateral format of cooperation. Look at the mechanism of Azerbaijan, Russia, and Iran, or Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey sort of mechanism. And in the meantime, Georgia-Azerbaijan cooperation on a bilateral basis, trilateral basis, was one of the excellent examples of the regional cooperation and regional integration process. And it's in a win-win situation economically and politically. In a sense, we have elements of the process, but we can bring all of these puzzles together to build wider packs of Caucasia based on respecting territorial integrities, inviolability of borders, based on the opening the communications, and also ending fragmentation that we have in the region that was a scar on the face of the region for so many years. Based on that reality, we can move forward. If Mr. Markedonov also allow me one element, just wanted to comment on the part of the question that I addressed directly for him about a rivalry. In no way Azerbaijan sees any kind of rivalry. Since independence, Azerbaijan policy was that not to see South Caucasus, or particularly Azerbaijan, as a battlefield of big powers, rather than as a marketplace of big powers, let's say, area of cooperation. For now, we have a new realities. Based on these realities, we would like to make, once again, South Caucasus as an important arena of cooperation between our three big neighbors, that's in Turkey, Russia, and Iran. But in no way this process is not an exclusive. It's an open-ended process. In the future, some other partners who would like to see indeed a real sustainable peace and security in the region, they can also join, they can also contribute to this process. But of course, regional countries and regional partnership and regional ownership is key fundamental issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hikmet. Mr. Sergei, Pax Caucasia, a new paradigm in Russia's near abroad. Surely the Kremlin must view this new reality with some level of trepidation. What say you, sir?
First of all, let me thank Emre for his question. Question directly addressed to me concerns the Turkish-Russian relationship, the dialectics and perception of them as rivalry. I suppose now we see two extreme poles in estimations of the Russian-Turkish relations. One of them is closer to characterize them like rivalry. And of course, this discourse appeals to the history, to 12 wars between the Russian Empire and Ottoman one. The other extreme poles concerns about ideas of Eurasian fraternity, brotherhood, and containment of the United States and the West. I suppose we should find a medium between the two extreme estimates. After the USSR dissolution, Russia and Turkey have seen survived some ups and downs. In the early 90s, we see rather down. Since 1997 till 2015, up. About economic relationship, energy sector, tourism, and so on. The Syrian crisis discovered some problems between us, but those problems were more or less successfully resolved. I don't agree with the perception of our relations as rivalry, as just today we agreed on the joint monitoring center on the ceasefire agreement on Nagorno-Karabakh. It's not rivalry. Rivalry would demonstrate something different from it. As for differences between Georgia and Azerbaijan, I suppose, and I told it openly for my Georgian colleagues, their biggest problem, as well as Ukrainian ones, in the transformation of their country, the battlefield between great powers, between the West and Russia, not the bridge for cooperation. It's a problem. Let me also briefly react on one question which was not responded, I suppose, about the potential changes in the Armenian foreign policy priorities. I don't believe, on the one hand, in primordialism. I am not a fan of this approach of the explanation. In 1967, you could ask Israeli people about treaty with Egypt, and maybe you would estimate it in the situation as crazy man who can predict it. But in Camp David, it became reality. This is why I'm not in favor of primordialism. On the other side, I brilliantly understand that Nagorno-Karabakh as a land, as a myth, became maybe the dominant discourse in the post-Soviet Armenia. And now its loss is perceived as trauma. And now the Armenian society is reflection, frustration, and so on and so on. I'm not sure that these foreign policy priorities would be changed immediately, tomorrow or in a year. But at the same time, we can see the growing at least pragmatism. I am not sure that tomorrow Azeris and Armenians will love each other, demonstrating their desire to cooperate. But maybe they would think better on a pragmatic situation. Discourse of pragmatism will be strengthened, I suppose.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sergei. Fascinating response. Next, we have Mrs. Nigar. You have another question? Please, the floor is yours.
Well, basically, we touched upon this topic a little bit, but again, I would like to speak about the failure of international law, unfortunately, international organizations. We must admit that the global community has failed to play a positive role in the conflict resolution, and international organizations failed its mission during the peace negotiations via UN and OSCE Minsk Group, and it failed during military actions, actually. And the resolution, as it is now, found itself in the regional setup. So two countries, Russia and Turkey, helped to cease the fire. So we all, as the members of the global community, global world, maybe should ask ourselves, what lessons should we take out of this? So my question is, what lessons should we take out of it? Why international organizations failed their job?
Can I try to answer?
Thank you, Mrs. Nagar. Yes. Yes, please, Mr. Sergei. Please do.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Nigar, thank you so much for your question. It requires at least series of solid articles, maybe a couple of monographs concerning the dialectics between right and might, the permanent quarrel between historians and lawyers about legalism and political reasonability and so on. I suppose we survived, me as a Russian former Soviet citizen, we survived the two collapses, two dissolutions. First of all, collapse of the USSR, and the second, the collapse or dissolution, reorganization of Yalta-Potsdam system, when many criteria were suspended, were questioned, by the way. The problem of the USSR collapse is absence of strict legal norms. Principles of political reasonabilities were laid as a fundament of this process. As a result, we see double standards and so on and so on. It's a very interesting question, very topical question, by the way. 1975, forgetting that a lot of new states emerged in Europe, because Europe is perceived by us by a rather stable continent. But sorry, in 1991, only on the former USSR space emerged 10 states, minus 5 states of Central Asia, 6 countries instead of 1 Yugoslavia, 2 countries instead of Czechoslovakia, 1 country instead of GDR and FDR. This is why a lot of changes. This is why maybe we can discuss new format how to discuss this problem of international law or rules of the game equal for everybody. It's a serious problem. But now we see the domination of unilateral aspects.
Indeed, Mr. Sergei, a very important response. A lot of lessons on the international arena learned from the way that this conflict has been concluded. We have another question from Mr. Turan. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Obay. First of all, I want to congratulate my old compatriots about a real kind of victory that we were expecting for long years. And it's a great relief for especially the Azerbaijani youth, as I am one of them, to not to look at the future in an unpredictable way. Now we have more opportunities to look for alternative ways in the world, and we are very thankful for this to especially our army. And my question is in a military direction. That's why I want to ask for maybe all of our panelists, but especially for Mr. Hajiyev and Mr. Markedonov. First of all, Azerbaijan was spending a huge amount of money from its budget to military spendings, especially purchasing the latest weapons, not just from Russia, but especially from Russia. And I'm actually asking the question that whether this budget will be decreased in the future years, or will it be stay same, or will the spending for the defense budget will increase or not? And secondly, as we all know, as the students of the international relations, that when we speak about in the Karabakh conflict, we especially say that the Russia was keeping both sides under its arms by selling weapons to Azerbaijan and giving Armenia for free. So if Russia was selling a high-tech weapon to Armenia, it was also presenting it to Azerbaijan to buy. And if the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict ended, will Russia will continue its politics, or Russia lost just another market, and a big market? So these are my two questions on the defense budget and the military spending. Thank you very much once again to our team that put this forum in act.
Thank you, Turan. Thank you, Turan. So those questions were to Mr. Hikmet Hajiyev?
No, yes.
These were one for Mr. Hajiyev and maybe for Mr. Markedonov as well.
Okay, so so the first question. So can you repeat briefly? We have just 6 minutes left. Can you repeat that the first two questions very briefly, so Mr. Hikmet can hear them?
Yeah, sure. Will Azerbaijan defense budget stay same or decrease or increase? And the second question, will Russia continue its actor as an active armament seller in the region?
First, from Azerbaijan's side, as regards to the military component of the conflict, really, Azerbaijan armed forces demonstrated professionalism and in fulfilling the mission of the peace enforcement operation. And here we have seen application of the modern technology and modern tactics and operational level approach to the military. And in the meantime, professionalism and courage of Azerbaijani soldiers. We saw that all components came together. But really, what we have surprised in the course of the active military operation from the side of Armenia, that they have invested hugely in fortification systems. It once again reaffirms the fact that Armenia didn't have any intention at all to withdraw its troops. And secondly, we were also surprised huge concentration of armaments from the side of Armenia. Imagine that Armenia had more or less 400 pieces of the tanks on the ground. In a sense, Nagorno-Karabakh, in terms of the geography, is not in a big area, and including the occupied territories, 7 adjacent territories. But in terms of the concentration of armaments, in terms of the concentration of firepower, it was most in a militarized area in the world. Therefore, our militaries and our armed forces, with a lot of courage, have inch by inch have liberated these territories. But what we have seen from Armenian side, they had a lot of miscalculation in terms of the professionalism of Azerbaijan armed forces and courage of Azerbaijani soldiers on the ground. And of course, an application of precise munition, and precisely guided munition, and loitering drones, and also very precise target selection and target acquisition provided Azerbaijan with a lot of abilities to avoid as maximum as we can collateral damage. It was also key fundamental fact. In every military operation, you can win a war, but it's always difficult to win a peace. But from Azerbaijan's strategy, here we have seen smart diplomacy, application of military power in terms of the enforcing to the peace, and in the meantime, diplomacy and information power. All of these elements came to closer to ensure winning their peace as well. Laurence, in his presentation, mentioned that maybe Azerbaijan's victory is not complete. But I would say it's incomplete because it's not Azerbaijan's intention to go beyond to having a more closer contact with certain civilians. And we also try to understand in a wider framework all of this development. As regards to the future military budget, once there was an interesting report by Berlin Economics Institute with the order of the European Union and the funding of the European Union. According to the estimation that if Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict resolved, immediately defense budget of Armenia, Azerbaijan can 4% go down at this stage. And it also effectively contributes to the national budget of these countries. But decrease of the defense budget, of course, it's always directly related with the wider security situation in the region. And based on that, Azerbaijan will make its further strategic decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Hikmet. We have about 2 minutes left. Mr. Yashar Sari, please, a question for the panelists. We've got 2 minutes left. If we could make it quick. Thank you, sir.
Okay. I will try to make quick. Going back to Karabakh problem, the problem is not solved yet. Yes, the occupation ended. Azerbaijan saved its territory, but the problem is still continued. Looking the problem, of course, still the Armenian side, if you look the Armenian political elite, except a few people like the Petrosyan, most of them feel that they lost they have the kind of trauma, which is we can call chosen trauma. Of course, when the nation have linked their chosen trauma with their identity, it's difficult to negotiate that nation. But somehow Azerbaijan has to find a way to not only negotiate with the Armenian government, Armenia, but also deal with the people who are living in Karabakh, because Karabakh is the Azerbaijan land, and those people who are living are the citizen of the Azerbaijan, which we can say. So
Right.
the Armenian made mistake, which is when they control in the Karabakh region or occupy the region, they played it time. Time was doing its business, which is they made that mistake. So today Azerbaijan has leverage and
Right.
control its own territory. Need the approach to the issue to do some take some steps to provide a kind of security for the people who are living in that territory. For example, the permitting the humanitarian aids coming from the Armenia to Karabakh is showing that Azerbaijan is not fully controlling its own region. The Russians peacekeeper is. So if the land is the fully Azerbaijan, then Azerbaijan have how to say Azerbaijan have to integrate the people who are living in Karabakh in the Azerbaijan state. So to winning the war, Azerbaijan
thank you,
completed
Mr.
its state building process. So let me finish asking the question.
Mhm.
So to approach the issue, not just only negotiating with the Armenian government, but also Azerbaijan has to somehow communicate with the people here who are living in the Karabakh. And what they want, that's turned their internal problem, right?
Thank you, Mr. Yashar.
So
Unfortunately, I have to jump in here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Yashar. Very important question. Well, I'm afraid we are out of time. Very important points brought up by all of our panels. I'd like to thank Mr. Hikmet Hajiyev, Mr. Sergei Markedonov, Mr. Laurence, Mr. Farid Shafiyev, and all of our participants. Thank you so much for participating in this very important and timely discussion on the future of Azerbaijan-Armenia relations and Karabakh. Good evening from Baku.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.